This is an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Good evening, I'm Matt Mulcahy. We begin this special Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall discussion tonight with what normally might be a celebration. Syracuse is #1. But we're not talking about the basketball team here. We're talking about being ranked first in the nation in the concentration of poverty. A greater percentage of poor Black and Hispanic families are living in poor neighborhoods in Syracuse than anywhere else in the country. Not only does Syracuse top the rankings, but the problem is actually getting much worse. It's worse than it was in the year 2000. The expert who did this research and reached these conclusions says the core of the problem is the way housing has been handled in our community and other American cities that has created an architecture of segregation. That is the name of a study done by Professor Paul Jargowsky for the Century Foundation. He's a director of the Center for Urban Research and Urban Education at Rutgers Camden. His work is getting attention in the New York Times, the Washington Post, media across the country. So we invited him to Syracuse to see firsthand the people in the neighborhoods that led to this #1 ranking. We welcome Paul Jargowsky to our special Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What's the essence, what's the headline out of your study that has brought you here and had Syracuse really taking notice?
That more of poor people live in these high poverty neighborhoods where they're subject not only to dealing with their own lack of income and their own difficulty in buying basic necessities, but they also are living in high poverty neighborhoods where everyone around them is struggling as well, so that the schools aren't working as well, where there's threats from violence and crime and drugs perhaps in the community. And all of these things make it harder for any individual poor family to try to succeed.
So being poor and being in a poor neighborhood is a twofold problem.
Right, it's the double burden of family and neighborhood poverty.
Let's take a look at some of the numbers we have here. We talk about the rankings. Syracuse ended up on top for Black concentration of poverty. And look at some of the communities below. Detroit, Michigan, which maybe people nationally might have guessed that one compared to a city like Syracuse, or even Rochester, which is just down the thruway. As we look at these numbers, as a researcher, did it come as a surprise to you that some of these mid-sized cities were doing worse in terms of increase in concentration of poverty than major markets?
Actually, it was something of a surprise because in the 1980s and 90s, when we also had a lot of this kind of problem, it was the larger cities where it was most noticeable: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. But this time around, it's not those cities. It's the smaller and mid-sized cities, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, that have, I guess, experienced deindustrialization and have not really replaced that with any kind of new economy. So it stands out as a case of a problem occurring in moving down the line from the larger cities to the smaller ones. And because of that, I think we haven't taken as much notice of it this time as we did previously, when it was very widely noticed. This time around, it's hardly been discussed at all, and it wasn't really until we started having the problems with civil unrest in Baltimore and in Ferguson and so forth that I think it started to be noticed more.
And it's not just in the Black communities. We're also have that same ranking for the Hispanic concentration of poverty in Syracuse. Again, more so than a problem in Philly or Detroit or other smaller communities. Again, Springfield, Mass. Being another mid-sized community in the Northeast. And then we also have the white or non-Hispanic white population included in this as well. And again, Syracuse not at the top of that list, but still, this is the top 5 in the country for a non-Hispanic white concentration of poverty, and Syracuse still there. So it does seem that, yes, it's racially relevant, but also goes across most of the racial boundaries as well.
That's correct, and it's very disproportionately a problem with minorities, particularly African Americans and Hispanics. However, the fastest rate of growth in concentration of poverty is among non-Hispanic whites. So that population actually more than doubled since 2000 nationally. But overall, if you look at it, it's really more of a problem with with Blacks and Hispanics, because you have 1 in 4 of the Black poor nationally living in high poverty neighborhoods, although 2/3 in Syracuse. Nationally, 1 in 6 Hispanic poor persons lives in such a neighborhood, but only 1 in 13 non-Hispanic whites lives in that kind of a neighborhood. Poor lives in that kind of a neighborhood. So if you're a poor person and you're white, you don't have to necessarily deal with as much of the neighborhood problems as if you're poor and you're a member of a minority group.
And part of your research shows, and part of your thesis to this all, is that this is something that could have been avoided if things had been done differently. As we toured the Southwest Community Center, we talked with Valerie Hill, who's the Director of Community Services, about this issue.
Poverty was designed to happen. It's not something that that it's just happened just because.
Right.
I believe it was designed, it was written into the plan. And it's up to us at the Southwest Community Center.
I mean, that's part of what I talked about in my report about how the policies and the exclusionary zoning and letting these suburbs grow that fast and all of that created more segregation that led to cities and neighborhoods really struggling.
So you're talking there to Valerie about cities and neighborhoods struggling. Now that you've come from an office where you're doing research and you've been on the ground in Syracuse, have you seen that firsthand?
Yes, I think so. And as we were discussing in that segment, it's not an inevitable thing. It's not true that cities always have to be poor and the suburbs always have to be wealthy. And in fact, it has come about in part because of our policies. We allow exclusionary zoning in the suburbs, which basically prevents many people from being able to move into the suburbs. We don't have affordable housing located in those areas. And so the non-poor and mostly whites moved into the suburbs further and further out, leaving behind poorer elements of the population. And we also saw that the suburbs in most metropolitan areas grew much faster than was needed to accommodate population growth, so that growth that was occurring was cannibalistic. It was taking people out of the central city and also the older suburbs now.
And certainly has been a problem in our area because we haven't had an influx of new population
That's right.
to take that place.
So
as
people move out, and it's the people who can afford to move out, the people left behind have fewer resources, the tax base erodes, the city has less resources to deal with issues, so it becomes, and then that of course causes things to get worse, and then more people try to move out. So it has gone on now for decades, and it's something that has happened all across the country.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, it's one thing to say there's a problem, another to find a solution, as Paul is discussing here. What does the Century Foundation report say about a path for Syracuse to break this growing poverty problem? We take a closer look at that and talk to those on the front lines of this battle as our Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall continues on NBC3.
You're watching an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Welcome back. We're having a terrific discussion about poverty in Syracuse. We found ourselves at the top of a list that we didn't really want to be on top of. In fact, many members in our community wondered if it could possibly be true that Syracuse is #1 for concentration of poverty in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods in our city. Paul Jargowsky, the Architecture of Segregation author, is with us tonight. He's talking about that, and we've had the opportunity to tour a little bit of the community, and you told me something before we took the air about the people you're meeting. You're finding a lot of passion in the discussion. That's a positive, isn't it?
Absolutely, a lot of passion, and people are ready to work hard, I think, in those communities. The problem is, though, that their efforts are being undermined because of the way we continue to develop our metropolitan areas, that is drawing out resources and people who could provide social capital and stability. So while it's important to continue to have those efforts being made, we really need to change the larger structure within which those communities have developed.
We're going to talk more about the structure in a minute. We also got a chance to tour the Assumption Food Pantry, which was really a fascinating, busy place. They serve 300 to 600 people a day with just their soup kitchen, in addition to the pantry work that's separate. Their volunteers feed the hungry, no questions asked. They also feel they're offering sustenance in other ways, such as love, belonging, while fixing larger problems of poverty. Paul says it's important to continue helping people all the while.
Even if we change those policies tomorrow, there will still be a long time before the impact is really felt. So in the meantime, people are hungry, and social programs need to be there, and communities need to be able to help people to survive day to day.
And our community is proud to be good at taking care of people that are in poverty. Have you seen that? Have you witnessed that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was very impressive.
But back to this idea of structure. Say we have a 20-year timeline, a 30-year timeline, a generation. Can we break out of this? Can a community like ours across this country make some changes that will matter?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. And you know, the first step really is that in general there has to be some plan towards how fast the housing is going to grow in the outer suburban ring so that it's not cannibalistic. Of course there's going to be growth in the outer suburban ring because that's where the land is. But at the same time, it can't be so fast that it's drawing out people at such a rate that it undermines the existing communities. And the second thing is just that there have to be options for housing for people of low and moderate income in a variety of different areas, not all in one place. All the affordable housing can continue to be located within certain neighborhoods because people need the ability to rent or an apartment or have a home near where the opportunities are that are important to them and near better schools that they want for their children. Right now, people don't have the option. They don't have the choice. If they're low income and they would like to live in a certain area, there are many parts of this metropolitan area where they just can't afford the house at all. And so some communities are just building housing for 1/3 or 1/4 of the population. We have said in 1968 that you can't discriminate against African Americans in housing. That was the Fair Housing Act.
Right.
And yet, you can still discriminate against people whose income is, less than $100,000 easily just by using zoning.
The solution you're talking about, and we actually have a graphic about this too, the federal and state governments must begin to control suburban development. This is right out of your report, similar to what you were just saying. And then the second page of it here, every city and town in a metropolitan area should be required to ensure that new housing is built with that income distribution in mind. This could potentially solve the problem of not losing more, but what about the rebuild of what's been left behind? Is that contained in the same solution, or is that another paragraph here?
Well, I think that you have to go at the right pace. The idea is not to totally stop investing in those communities. There needs to be more affordable housing built, and particularly replacing existing units that are dilapidated and so forth in the inner city. If we should start down the road where there are options for people, and if people want to move, they should be able to move to live in a different part of the community. On the other hand, there are going to be many people who are going to want to stay in the central city. They have family ties, they have church connections, they like that part of the city, and so they clearly should be able to stay there. So it's not a question of moving everyone out of the central city. It's not a dispersal policy. It is an opportunity policy. And it has to do with having neighborhoods of choice so that people can move to where they need to be and where they want to be, and where they can afford to be. So it has to be a moderate and affordable unit. So that's very different than saying let's empty out the inner city. That's not what I'm talking about.
Absolutely not. Paul Jargowsky, thank you. You started a conversation in this community. Were you aware of that when you put the report out?
I was not, and I'm delighted that people have taken notice of it. I hope it's useful.
Yeah, it certainly is so far, and thanks for being here and starting this tonight. Still ahead as we continue, we've lined up an impressive roster of community leaders to be part of our roundtable discussion on the poverty problem in Syracuse. We'll hear how they hope to get a handle on this problem. All that when as our Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall returns on NBC3. Welcome back to Your Voice, Your Future, the poverty problem in Syracuse. It's an issue everyone is speaking out about, including Republican Congressman John Katka.
Number one is it's the right thing to do, it's a moral thing to do, but more importantly, it costs them money. Because when these people are struggling to get by on public assistance and around public assistance, it costs us money. So if you want to look at it from a selfish standpoint, their incentive is to help them get off public assistance. Help get off public assistance, you're not paying for, you're not incurring those costs. So it's really from a moral standpoint and an economic standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world.
And that was Congressman Katka joining us from Washington as we talk about poverty all week long. Joining me now here in the studio, Syracuse Mayor Stephanie Miner and Onondaga County Executive Joni Mahoney. Thanks for joining us for this special broadcast tonight. And Mayor, let's start with you, Mayor of Syracuse. Yet here Syracuse is at the top of these lists. Did it surprise you that Syracuse was, or was it something that you already had a sense you have a problem on your hands here?
No, unfortunately, it wasn't surprising. And we've had a sense that it's been a problem and a growing problem at the same time that we've seen supports and programmatic supports being cut. So it's a real issue among all of our neighborhoods, and one that we've been working on. But as I think when you read the report, you see that this is an issue that's impacting all of New York State, all of the country, and I think it calls for statewide solutions, national solutions as well.
Needing to be creative, too.
Absolutely, and looking at housing policy, transportation policy, economic development, so that we can not have the kind of concentration of poverty that we're getting in our cities across the country.
Well, County Executive, you're in charge of the county, in those very suburbs that over the course of our lifetimes suck people out of the center of the city. Yet you've taken some approaches on that and trying to say, hold on, let's not keep doing that same thing. What's your view of that?
That's right. I think the mayor's right that these policies that don't seem like they directly affect the city have the result of these concentrations of poverty. And I thought Paul?
Yes, Paul Jargowsky, yes.
Made a good point that it's a double whammy. You know, being a family that's living beneath the poverty line is a big problem, but it's exacerbated by the fact that all of your neighbors are as well, and there aren't the supports around you that could help you rise out of poverty. On the county level, we stopped building the sewers and the roads out further in the suburbs, recognizing that we have a flat county-wide population, and when you have the same number of people and you build more further away, you're just exacerbating that problem in the city with vacant housing and that concentration of poverty. So I think it was a good lesson for people about why, if you live in the suburbs, you should not only care about this problem, but how maybe we contributed.
And I think I know in that report, one of the things he mentions is he talks about sprawl. And the county executive has been very eloquent on saying how damaging sprawl is. And this is one of the areas where it's particularly damaging. But let me just give you an example about what that means in terms of having the double whammy. This past year, we saw Centro say they were going to have to cut bus routes back because they're financing. When you cut bus routes back in the city, what you're doing is preventing people from getting to work. And so what are those people going to do? Because they can't afford a car. And then if you take away the public transportation, then they can't afford to get to work. They can't work, and therefore they just continue to spiral downward. That's one of those areas where we say, look, we need transportation funding, we need to help so that we can get people to their jobs. And what we've also seen happen is in the economic development that is going on in our region, we see a lot of the lower skilled jobs being in the outer ring of the suburbs. And so in order to get people from the city that want those jobs, we have to have transportation options for them to get them to those places in the suburbs.
And that even includes even recent immigrants to the city who would like to have a job in a suburban factory, but might have a hard time getting there.
And I can tell you firsthand, I know a number of refugee groups and immigrants and neighborhood groups who have vans, and they take 6 to 10 people out to Marquardt or other places, and then they turn around and come back. It would be easier and beneficial, and we could get more workers if we had other dependable transportation, so they wouldn't have to just worry about one person with one car who continues to do this.
Congressman Katka also addressed the costs to government and to taxpayers for having to care for people that are living in poverty, and you deal with that in the county budget and the state mandates that come down. Do you think that the money is being properly spent in terms of caring for people and giving them an opportunity to get out of the situation that they're in?
Well, that's, I think, the crux. That is the perfect question. Because are we providing the programs after the fact? Yes. I think we're doing a very good job with safety net and temporary assistance and food stamps and heating assistance and all of that. But are we allocating the resources? Probably not. I think if you allocated the resources earlier and made it so that folks could survive on their own and thrive on their own, then you wouldn't have the need for the programs at the end. And that is, again, part of this conversation. if you have a concentrated poverty in the city and it erodes your tax base, the mayor then can't collect the resources she needs to improve the schools. And if you don't have a good education for kids, you're making it that much harder for them to get out of poverty. And then they come to the county where we can say, yes, we have great programs after the fact, but did we invest that money properly? Probably not.
And this is one of those cases where I think in governing you think about short-term and long-term. So short-term is providing the safety net, making sure that families don't become homeless, making sure that they aren't hungry, making sure that they have good housing, which I think we do a good job at. We can always do more. But also the longer-term solution is really making sure that children and families get the education necessary so that they can get the jobs to take care of themselves and their families. And one of the things that the county executive has worked with us is to make sure that we get families and children health care in schools, so that we know that if a child gets a toothache and stays out of school for a week because he or she doesn't have access to a dentist, that's not going to be in the beneficial long run for any of us. So getting those services in the school where children are, where families come to get them, is helpful in that short term so that we can build on that to have a long-term better outcome.
And Matt, I would just say quickly, adding to that, the mayor and I have come together around Say Yes to Education. We do the services part, wrapping around so teachers can teach, and the mayor handles the school part. But the argument that I would make out in the suburbs is not only is that the right thing to do, we're all human beings and we have to give everybody a fair shot, but if I can't sell you on that idea, I would like to try to sell you on the economic idea, which is it's your tax dollars that are being spent as a result of that failure. You can invest in those first 18, 22 years for an education, or you can spend the money for the rest of a human being's life because we failed to invest when we could have.
And it certainly can't afford to keep going in the direction we are now in terms of the concentration of poverty, particularly for the Black and Hispanic communities. It's already 60%. What are we going to let it go to 70 and 80?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think people's intentions are good, and I don't think people realize what the effects of some of these decisions have been, and this is good to draw people's attention. I hope the county legislature now will take up issues of sprawl and issues of, you know, how we plan our land use and recognize what the long-term effect of those decisions is.
We thank you both for being here. We have a lot of other folks who want to talk to get their expertise, but thank you. Hopefully this is the beginning of a good dialogue.
Thank you for doing this.
Our pleasure. Much more still to come on Your Voice, Your Future, our town hall meeting. When we come back, we're talking with two people who are really on the front lines of the poverty battle every day. What they see is the problem, what needs to be done to reverse that trend when we come back.
You're watching an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Well, welcome back once again to our special town hall broadcast tonight. We have a lively discussion going here about poverty in Syracuse and how it affects our whole central New York region. Joining me now is Sharon Owens of the Southwest Community Center and Rita Paniagua of the Spanish Action League. And welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You two are both certainly right in the center, living this every day. Let's start with you, Sharon, at the Southwest Community Center. We've shown people some of what goes on there. Valerie Hill took us around for a little tour last week. But what do you see every day of how significant this problem is?
I'll give you an example. Every third Thursday through the work and collaborative work with the Food Bank of Central New York, we have what we call fresh food giveaway. And it's fresh fruits and vegetables. A flatbed truck brings loads of it in and we distribute it. We probably see about upwards of 100 people every third Friday. But the nuance is that you know, you kind of know the individuals that come in who know the routine because they know exactly who to talk to, where to sit, what to do. What we're noticing now are the individuals that kind of come in, seem a little tentative, not quite sure of the procedure, and I'll say, are you here for the giveaway? And they'll say, yeah, I am. And I said, well, this is where you go, sign up, we'll call you on, your name on, your number on, and we'll get you in. We're seeing more and more of those individuals.
So they're the newcomers.
They're the
they
new
haven't been
folks.
down this road before.
They have not, and it's a new deal for them. And it's very nerve-wracking. It's the last giveaway, there were individuals who came in who you can clearly see because of their attire came from maybe a low-wage job that required a suit and tie. They may have been doing some kind of you know, entry-level office work or something like that. But this being there would supplement what they would get. And they said, you know, I just heard about this, and can I get anything? And I was like, absolutely, this is what you do.
So it doesn't come as a surprise to you that this problem is getting worse if you're talking about data or real life examples?
Absolutely.
We
No
live
surprise.
with this every day. I mean, I've been at La Liga for 13 years now, and does it take us by surprise that we're the #1 in poverty? Absolutely not. In the Hispanics, one of the things that are more likely, like you would see in our center, walking our center, are people that have very low English skills, which, as per the Labor Department, the unemployables. And so we need to work with that. It's very hard.
That's the label they're given?
Yeah. We have to work with that very hard. Right now, we're offering programs where we talk to the employer, and we do tailor to trade Spanish courses, English courses to the Spanish speakers, so that we can employ them. So at least they know that they can understand the directives at work and things of that nature. Right now, as per a CFA grant that we've just earned just recently, we're going to be able to provide that needed transportation in our communities to places where our current transportation system, either it's not at the hours that they're out that way, or they just don't go to certain places.
I want to ask you, we have a graphic for the Hispanic concentration of poverty. We showed it briefly earlier in the broadcast, but let's go back to it. It does show Syracuse at the top of the list, ahead of major markets like Philadelphia and Detroit. You were telling me, though, that we're no longer seeing poor people only in the near West Side neighborhood, near La Liga's headquarters. We're seeing a spread to other neighborhoods throughout the city. Is that creating an advancement for Hispanic people, whether they be Cuban or Puerto Rican, by getting out of the worst neighborhoods and creating another space for themselves?
So it can go either way. Some of them do start living and try to make it in the West Side. That's primarily where everybody would kind of walk into, and then they would go to other neighborhoods as soon as they can find more suitable places to live. And
yeah, Sharon, we can keep helping people. You guys are doing a great job. You're both doing a great. In fact, Paul Jargowsky, who did the research, came to Syracuse and complimented the community for doing a great job of helping people. But what do we do about the problem?
You talked about it in the section before we came on. You have to get it at the policy level.
Exactly.
I'll give you an example. And much of what I'm going to say, the county can be a part of the solution, but some of that is federal as well for welfare to work regulations that come down through the county. So, for example, we're looking to get people to work. So today you're unemployed, you get training, and you get a job the next day. Well, your recertification comes shortly after that for food stamps, housing support, WIC, whatever has been helping your family maintain, as the county exec talked about. There has to be a transition period for
There's
people.
none.
And when you're saying that, you mean that if I work, I make $100, I lose $100 of benefits, correct?
Exactly.
It's a direct relationship.
Yeah, because it's based on the income that's in your family, in your household. So I could move into, the state is looking at $15 an hour. That will throw many families who are relying on some benefits into a tizzy, because it will spiral you out of the framework for what you're eligible for. And I'm talking about, people don't want to have to get assistance, but it's a necessary, safety net. So if we're able to transition folks, I'm not going to lose my housing subsidy. I'll still be able to get a level of food stamps that keeps me there. Because if we remove it, we're sending people potentially right back to where they started.
Right, and provides a disincentive to go for the 15 hour, even if it becomes a $15 an hour job.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what happens all through our communities. That's exactly what happens. There are other well-intended programs with not such positive results through employment. We have people that come to La Liga to do a job experience, and then they send them to teach them English to different schools. But then they're asked to do they need to go out and get 60 job leads. in a week while they're caring for children, doing this other stuff that they're being asked to do, and it just doesn't work. You know, we're setting them for failure.
There needs to be more evaluation of what is working, and then find some new answers. Right? Sounds like you two may have some of those answers. Sign them up. Sharon and Rita, thanks for joining us. We do appreciate that. When Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall returns right here on NBC3, we're going to sit down for a one-on-one discussion with a single mom who's living in poverty right now. She's working 2 jobs, but boy, it's still tough to get by. We're going to tell her story when we come back.
You're watching an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Well, welcome back. So far, we've talked to our expert researcher, our government leaders, our members of the community that are getting their hands dirty, helping people with poverty. Right now, though, I want to introduce you Pamela Jean Riley Amadon. I'm going to call her PJ because that's what folks call you, right? PJ is here as a bit of a representative of somebody who's working hard, and it's not so easy to get by, is it?
No, not at all.
Tell me what goes on in your life. You're working?
I work 2 jobs, and I spend time with my granddaughter and my daughter as much as possible, but I run from job to job, and I struggle to buy groceries or health insurance, and you know, I opt to buy groceries and clothing instead of health insurance.
So currently you don't have health insurance because of that?
Because of that, exactly.
Yeah. Do you get any public assistance? Do you get any help?
No.
Are you close to being eligible for it?
Well, I fall between the cracks because, you know, I don't make enough, but yet I make too much.
Yeah. And so have you inquired about it before or wondered, am I eligible for something?
Yes, I have. I've applied for Medicaid twice, and I'm not qualified for Medicaid, but yet there's an open enrollment in November 1st that I'm going to apply for health insurance, but then I'll have to cut into my food budget and my clothing budget because of it. But I need health insurance.
Yeah, well, certainly. Understandably, everybody needs it, and how much medical care costs these days. You just have to go without, right? I mean,
right.
Have you been to a doctor in the last year?
I hurt myself in April real bad, and I went to a doctor. I went to 6 doctors, got no answers, and now I have $3,000 worth of health insurance bills. And it's hard to pay them. You know, you can give them so much a month, and then they send you, you know, to collection agencies.
Here comes the collection people. I can understand that. What about food and making ends meet? What's your monthly budget for food? Do you have enough to get through each month?
I do now because I don't pay for health insurance. When I had health insurance, when I was working one job full time, I was paying $400 a month for health insurance and had no food. You know, I was lucky if I had $20 a week. Lucky if I had $20 a week. So, for food. And I went without.
Yet you're kind enough. You spend some time at the Assumption Food Pantry, and you're actually helping other people.
I'm giving back to my community because my community has given to me.
Why is that experience important for you to go and help other people in that sense?
Because people help me, you know, like people reach out to me and have reached out to me, so I want to give back, and I want to show my granddaughter that, you know, people do need help. You know, so I took her to make sandwiches this summer, you know, and let her know that not everybody has. You know, people have to go to a food pantry, and we've had to go to a food pantry when my daughter was little, you know, just trying to struggle to make ends meet.
What would you like to see changed if you know, we have the mayor, the county executive here, other leaders in our community. Is there something that comes out in your mind that a change in a rule, a policy, or something that might make a difference in your life?
Well, I know Rita was talking about if they raised the minimum wage, then the people would fall between the cracks, you know. So I don't really have any answers or anything I can think of.
Because you already know what it feels like firsthand to fall. You're in the crack.
Yeah,
you've already fallen into that.
You know, you can have an education, you can go to school, get a job, and you still struggle to make ends meet, working paycheck to paycheck. And I'm not the only one, and I know that.
PJ, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you sharing your story. It really does mean a lot. Coming up, does the root of our problem lie with education, as PJ just mentioned, or is it maybe a lack thereof? We're looking at Syracuse's startling graduation rates, but what's being done to try to turn the tide, to improve those rates? and give some hope for the future. When Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall returns on NBC3.
You're watching an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Our discussion continues now as our town hall broadcast continues, focusing in more on education. It's a word that's come up a lot in our conversations tonight about a possible solution to get people out of poverty in the years to come, and maybe another generation or won't have to deal with these same issues. Joining us now, Suzanne Slack, the CFO for the Syracuse City School District, and Wayne O'Connor from the Hillside Work Scholarship Program. Thanks for being here, both of you.
Thank you.
Suzanne, first of all, we have some graduation rates. We talk about this a lot. I know that's one of the things we come back to the school district and ask questions about. The Syracuse City Schools, the numbers are in the range of 50% of students graduate, depending on how you break it down. And when you break it down into other groups, whether it be black or Hispanic or female, male, the numbers certainly go down lower. But you're working on it.
Correct.
And do you feel like you're making progress?
Absolutely. Our graduation rates have gone up about 4% since 4 years ago. So when the superintendent started till now, they've actually gone up about 4%. Part of that is all the initiatives that we've put in place to keep students in the classroom longer. In 12 of our schools, we've increased the number of pre-K classrooms because studies have shown graduation rates are directly linked to pre-K experiences for 3- and 4-year-olds. We have extended professional development for our teachers. We, as you know, have the Fresh Fruits and Vegetables program to make sure the kids have vegetables to take home and eat at school. We serve about 11,000 free breakfasts every day and 14,000 free lunches every day, and all of those things help the kids get to school, stay in school, and do better academically.
Really, basic needs being met. Let's look at the graduation rates, and we'll take a quick peek at those numbers here. We talked about how they have been something you've been working on. They've been improving over the last couple of years, and Wayne, your program in particular has focused on students that are in perhaps the most need and reaching out to them. And how have you started to make a difference with children who are in this district?
Well, we work with about 1,000 young people in the Syracuse City School District. We are in 5 middle schools, and we're in all of the high schools. We have youth advocates in every one of those schools. All of our children, 98, 99% of them come from some level of poverty. We have an extensive youth advocacy. We support our students 24/7, 365. Pick them up in 7th grade, 8th grade, work with them right through till graduation. So I think that in this discussion, if I may, I've had the opportunity over the years to sit down with hundreds of young people. I'm very fortunate. I've taught in the Syracuse School District, graduate of the Syracuse City School District. And when I ask them what their goals are, they always say the same thing. I want to graduate from high school, I want to go to college. And if I ask that same question of someone in the suburbs, you're going to get the exact same question. But here's where it differs. When I say to a young man, for instance, in the Syracuse City School District, if I say, well, what's going to happen if you don't graduate? Without hesitation, every one of them say to me, I'm going to go to prison or die. Now, that's startling. If I ask that same question of somebody in Fayetteville Manlius, and I have done so, the answer I get is, I'm going to have a hard time getting a good job. So there's a different level of sense of the future, which I think is really at the essence of what we need to do to help our young people out of poverty, and the best way out of poverty that I know of is to get an education.
You know, we've talked with Paul Jargowsky, who started off this broadcast tonight, about that sense that poverty is not just about money. It's about attitude, it's about a sense of hope. Do you see that in the Syracuse schools, that children who might be hungry, who aren't getting support at home, who are going home to a poor neighborhood, have less hope than what their counterpart might have in another suburban district?
Absolutely. We have, on average, a little bit more than 400 homeless students in our schools every day. So they don't necessarily have somewhere to go at night, but they come into school every day, and they are traumatized by what they see and live with every day. But when they come to school, we raise the expectations for them. So the teachers hold high expectations that they will perform well on exams, that they will pass the grade and they will graduate, and share those expectations with the children, because, as Wayne said, the best way out of poverty is to have an education. If you graduate high school, you're much more likely to get a good job and to make more money as you get older. if you graduate college or high school and then go on to college, those chances are even greater.
What about that idea? Is graduating high school enough, Wayne? Is it okay? If they graduate from high school, are they all set if they're living in a poor neighborhood, coming from a poor neighborhood?
No, I don't think they're all set. I think that what I always tell our young people is that opens up doors for you. That's not the end game. So while graduation is part of our major goal, and the good news, by the way, the great news here is this bleakness that we've been talking about, this is a problem that can be addressed in a positive manner. If you have a school district like the Syracuse City School District with incredibly dedicated and skilled educators, and you have an organization, doesn't have to be Hillside, but you have organizations that work with children in school and outside of school, beyond the bell we call it, after school, into the evening, on the weekends, over the summer. We find that the students who work with us, 97% of those children in the last 3 years have graduated. So, and these are all children that are coming with us with certain risk factors. So this is achievable. And to answer your original question, no, we think we have to do more to get our kids better prepared. We're telling our kids we need 80 or better GPA. Just graduating, just making it's not enough. I have an advocate up at OCC this year because a lot of our children go to OCC, but they don't last when they get there.
Why don't they last?
You know, I've talked to Dr. Crable up there. It's a nationwide issue with children who are going to community colleges who are coming from poverty. A lot of it is that they're still living in the same neighborhoods that you've been talking about, so they'll go up to OCC and they come back home, and maybe conditions in the neighborhood are not such that you're going to be doing much studying. So we have an advocate up there at OCC this year who is working with, we have over 100 students up there. So she's providing advocacy for them and direction for them up there. There's cultural issues. I mean, in terms of just the transition to college is always difficult.
Sure.
And I think that our kids sometimes get that 65, 70 and but it's not good enough. It's not good enough. We know that the #1 indicator of success in college is not SAT scores. The latest research says it's GPA coming out of high school.
Suzanne, if the Syracuse schools could have a wish granted, what more could you do if you had more? If you were able to juggle resources differently, what would you change? Or do you feel like you have the right plan, it just needs to continue to be executed?
I think that the superintendent does have the right plan, but we need the funding to support that. So we need to be able to extend the day in all of the schools, not just some of the schools. We need to give students more time with their teachers to make sure that they're getting their arms around the core curriculum and the things that they need to know for ELA, math, science, and social studies. All of these supports, they do take time and effort and resources. I think that we have some of the most outstanding teachers in all of Onondaga County right here in Syracuse, but we need to provide them with all the resources they need to ensure that these kids have success as they move on.
And Wayne, as we wrap this up, you mentioned that when you ask a student in the Syracuse School District what his future is, and if he doesn't graduate, he's going to go to prison or die. What about the ones who are coming out of the program that have gone through the program? Do they have the same answer, or have they now would they now have a different answer? One that's more
they would have a different answer. These are great kids, first of all. There's a stereotype about these children. We get jobs for our children. They all want jobs. They're not lazy children. Mm-hmm. They are skilled, they're intelligent, they're compassionate. Their condition is not of their own making. And they don't need a handout. This is not a handout issue. This is a leg up. No, they would not give you the same answer.
Good. That's progress. Thank you for both joining us tonight. We appreciate that. You're watching Your Voice, Your Future, our Town Hall on NBC3. We're back in a moment.
You're watching an NBC3 Town Hall. Your voice, your future. The poverty problem in Syracuse.
Well, welcome back. As we wrap up tonight, we'll look at what we have talked about. We talked with Paul Jargowsky, the researcher from Rutgers-Camden, who did the Century Foundation report and showed us how position Syracuse is, in fact, at the top of a list of poverty throughout the country in terms of concentration, particularly for blacks and Hispanics in our community. In fact, there are the numbers. 2/3 of black poor people in Syracuse live in poor neighborhoods, more than Detroit, Michigan. That's a remarkable number. We talked about the Hispanic population as well, also topping that list, 62%. We talked with Rita Paniagua from the Spanish Action League and Sharon Owens from the Southwest Community Center. Some answers, a discussion started tonight. Thanks for joining us on this Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. I'm Matt Mulcahy. Have a great night.